If we women want to protect ourselves from getting used and manipulated and never, ever want to be blindsided or brainwashed, what subtle yet horrifying trickery do psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, and cult leaders use to trap us?
I think we're susceptible to anyone who we perceive in a positive light because they seem to be kind, they seem to be understanding, they like us, they love us, or they say they do, and we want to like them back. So it's been called love bombing. You initially become involved with someone or a group, and they just shower you with what seems to be unconditional love and attention, and you feel good. And you also feel like, I owe it to this person who is being so kind and loving to acquiesce to their suggestions, their requests, to get into the car, to get more involved in the group, to go out on more dates and begin a relationship. But here's the magic word: no. You just say that to them about one of their requests. They say, well, would you do this? Would you do that? No. And you stick with no. And you see how conditional their attention, their affection is actually in real time. Because what you're saying is, do you still love me? Do you still care for me? Do you still like me when I don't do what you want me to do? How does this new love in my life talk about his exes? Does he say, you know, I made some mistakes and I wish I had handled that better, but I didn't, and maybe this time I'll be better, and I'm still friends with my ex. You know, I still care about her, I still talk to her from time to time, I'm still friends with her family? Or do they say, she was totally wrong, I never talk with her, you know, what a bitch. You know, I don't have anything to do with her. So do they really love you? Do they really care about you? Or is that highly conditional affection and love that is based on your compliance? Whether you're in an abusive, controlling relationship or you're in a destructive cult, there's a sense I can never be good enough. No matter what I do, I'm broken, I need to be fixed, and that engenders dependency upon the leader or the partner to fix you. So you feel like, what more can I do? Which is part of being a pawn, is what more can I do? I can never be good enough. I can never do enough. I can never please you enough. You feel so broken continuously that you feel you can't leave because you're broken and you need to be fixed. And it's always your fault. You're made to feel shame and guilt. You have come up short. You have failed. And of course, that keeps you locked into that situation of submission. And you will do whatever they want you to do because they're saying, this is what you need to do in order to get fixed. And I think it is the impediments that are constructed through the kind of indoctrination that you go through in a destructive cult or in a very abusive and controlling relationship. You're made to feel that anything you think outside of what you are being indoctrinated to believe by the controlling group leader or the partner is crazy. You can't think outside of the box. And if you talk to someone outside of the box, they're crazy. They want to pull you out of the most wonderful relationship you've ever been in. They're, you know, just a negative person that you need to cut off, and so on. And so this is how people become isolated and can be manipulated as a pawn, because they are relying on only the information that they receive from the partner, from the group, and what that leader or partner says is right, and what they say is wrong, and you are isolated. And so this is why an abusive, controlling partner or a cult will try to diminish or cut you off from feedback from people that are not in on it and part of it with the abusive controlling partner or the group, because they don't want you to be able to get that kind of feedback to reinforce an alternative explanation for what's going on. So we talk about it like brainwashing, but really what it is control of information, control of the environment, and making people doubt their own ability to think, to feel, and to subordinate their emotions, their thoughts to the dictates of the abusive controlling partner or the group that could be called a cult. And the fear is palpable in many different groups, the sense that if I leave this group, I'm lost. If I leave this group, my life will go off the rails. If I leave this group, I have betrayed the higher power. I have turned my back on God. And so people feel ashamed, they feel guilt, they feel I can't leave, or if they do leave, they're in a very diminished state, they're very depressed, it takes them years sometimes to recover. And I think it's the same in abusive controlling relationships. Women feel, if I could just be good enough, I could make him happy. If I could just do everything right like he wants, everything could be all right in our relationship. And if I leave, I'm leaving this person who really, really loves me and who has told me how much he or she loves me. And I can't betray that love. I cannot walk away from that. I need to stay, I need to make it work, and I'm being told by the group, by the abusive controlling partner over and over again, the problem is you. If it's not working, the problem is you, because you're not doing what you should be doing to make it work. So people, when they leave, if they can summon up the courage to leave, they feel oftentimes ashamed and broken and depressed because they feel somehow they should have stayed. And they weren't strong enough, they weren't good enough, they didn't love enough, it was on them.
Ooh, okay. In your book, you talk about the stats and you say that 7.7% of narcissists are men and 4.8% are women. I really thought there was going to be a massive gap between them, but clearly there isn't. And so talk to me about female cult leaders. I cannot wrap my head around that. So please help me understand. And what cases have you seen?
Well, usually cult leaders are men, in my experience, but there have been women that are cult leaders. Amy Carlson, who was called Mother God, and she led a group called Love Has Won, which was largely in Colorado. And that group really was very intense. And that was the case of Amy Carlson. She would stream online as the voice of God, revealing God's will to the world.
This huge golden light, beam of light, and it's connected to the ships up there. We've been getting a lot of reports of seeing ships, people seeing ships, and it's going to become more increased in activity as we continue forward in these energies.
They revered her, they worshiped her, and there would be thousands of people that would follow online the group, and that following contributed money to her and so forth. And she had a very small physical following that was with her at all times. I would say no more than 50 or 60 people. But they were beaten down, controlled. She could at times be very violent, physically abusing people in the group, slapping them, berating them, locking them in a closet or whatever. Eventually she would die from chronic alcoholism and anorexia. I mean, she just simply died. But when she died, there was a residue of cash, property, and the people in the group could not believe that she was gone. And so what they did was—
she's the mother of God, right?
Yeah, because she was Mother God. So they wrapped her in Christmas lights and they put her in a place of reverence in this house. And they eventually were found out, and some of them were arrested for abusing a corpse.
Oh, they actually wrapped her corpse in Christmas lights? I thought that was like a metaphor.
No,
God.
They literally wrapped her corpse in Christmas lights, and they would not let go of the idea that this was God and that they worshiped her. And Amy Carlson, to me, came across as deeply narcissistic, and a person that had no empathy for her mother, for her sister, for a child that she abandoned, for her followers, just was obsessed with her own personal needs, her own self-fulfillment, her aggrandizement, and very destructive person. And so this is a typical cult leader. Now, another example would be a woman, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, who led a group called Church Universal and Triumphant, and they bought a huge ranch in Montana and created an expansive compound there, complete with bomb shelters and buildings. And Elizabeth Clare Prophet ruled over thousands of people for a period of time. And she could also be very authoritarian, very much exploiting her members financially. There's also a woman in the state of Washington, J.Z. Knight, who leads a group called the Ramtha School of Enlightenment that has been called a cult. J.Z. Knight claims that she channels a dead spirit, a general from the lost continent of Atlantis, and who died 35,000 years ago, she says. And so her followers, which have included some celebrities, Linda Evans, who was a well-known actress on the television series Dynasty, was or still is an acolyte of J.Z. Knight. And so there are these people that have given her money and so forth. She's a very wealthy woman. And so these people, it's like a business. You set yourself up, and it's easy to do online, and you become this object of worship. You then indoctrinate people through your videos and so forth. And so what you need to ask yourself is, when you become involved with someone or a group online, do they have those telltale characteristics that we've talked about of a destructive cult? Are they making demands on you? What kind of demands are they making? Are they isolating you socially? Are you becoming embedded in that online community to the exclusion of your family, your old friends? How is that affecting your life? And so we really need to ask ourselves this question, because anyone with an electronic device that connects to the internet, anyone with a smartphone is a target, and you can lose yourself and lose years of your life. So if you have a partner or a group that is texting you all the time, they're trying to control you. That's a red flag. And what was interesting with India and the cult NXIVM, I first met Catherine Oxenberg, and she was desperate to reunite with India, and she was very worried about her safety in this group. India would end up being branded. But having said that, Catherine Oxenberg wanted to get her daughter out quietly. She came to me, and for months we worked together trying to figure out a way that India could come out, work with me or someone like me, and leave NXIVM. But Keith Raniere wouldn't have any of it. And India and her mother, Catherine Oxenberg, had a very close relationship. But at the point that I came in, it was off the rails, and India was suspicious of her mother, not willing to meet with her. It was very, very difficult for Catherine. So eventually, Catherine realized the only way that I'm going to get my daughter out, and I'll never forget when she said this to me, she said, is I have to take the whole cult down.
Hell yeah!
And I looked at her and I said, Catherine, there have been many people, and I told her about Tony Natale, this former girlfriend of Keith Raniere, who for decades was harassed by him and tried to warn people about him, and would go to the authorities, and other people that would go to the authorities and say, please do something about this guy. He's breaking the law. And of course, eventually he would be put in prison for the rest of his life for breaking the laws. But for years, no one did anything. And then Catherine Oxenberg, with her connections, her media connections, people she knew, she networked and eventually met Sarah Edmondson. And Sarah Edmondson had been branded and was a member of NXIVM. And Catherine and Sarah Edmondson worked together, and it was Sarah that appeared on the front page of the New York Times showing her scar, and that led to Keith Raniere going to trial. And I testified against Keith Raniere at that criminal trial in New York, and to see him there in the court so diminished, no longer able to wield power and essentially powerless, that was a different way of looking at him, because I had met with him many times over the years because he sued me for 14 years.
He spent $5 million to try and sue
$5 million suing me, and hundreds of thousands of dollars to have private investigators stalk me, surveil me, go through my garbage. Now, he thought that if he sued me, I'd either take the articles down, which I never did, or that I'd capitulate because I couldn't afford to pay the amount of money it cost to go through 14 years of litigation. So over the years, I think that the internet is a two-edged sword. On one side, the cults can recruit online and they can use social media to trick people and trap people in their influence. However, the flip side is that we can use Facebook, Twitter, and the online world to tell the truth about these groups. And I think the fact that I've been sued 5 times for sharing information online proves that is a fact. So I would urge people that whenever you're approached by a group and you think that there's something quite odd or suspicious about them, as they say, Google them. Go online and find out what is their history. Were they ever sued? Were there people that left that were interviewed that were hurt by them? Are there complaints about them? Have other people been suspicious of them? And if you go online and look, you might find something.
You said the amount of people that don't understand cults and how people get trapped. And the thing that we do a lot, not we, but the thing that other people do a lot, is they blame the victim. They say, well, it's their fault. Why did they go back? If their parents were trying to warn them, why did they get trapped? Why did they go and brand themselves? Why didn't they just walk out? If it was painful, why not just walk out the door? So talk to me about that, of how much we start to look at the victim. And then please do help me understand, why do victims go back, or why don't they then just pain, cool, equals, I leave the room?
There are so many people that walk away from a cult, that walk away from an abusive, controlling relationship, and they're beating themselves up over, well, how could I be so stupid to fall for that or to believe that? And the answer is, you need to unpack what happened to you. You need to go back and you need to rewind your experience, probably with a professional counselor or therapist, someone who is knowledgeable either about abusive, controlling relationships or cults, who has experience helping people from situations like that in recovery, and look at how it happened to you and unpack it. Like you're rolling a movie, freeze frame it. What was that? How does that parallel information control, milieu control, the fact that I was being used as a pawn? How were techniques of coercive persuasion used on me at this point and that point? And unpack it so that, number one, you understand and you're not beating yourself up, and you're placing the blame where it belongs, on the perpetrator. And number two, so that you can see whenever anybody might try to pull this on you again. And there's a guy who was in the documentary The Vow, which I also was in, and his name is Mark Vicente. And he was in the Rantha School of Enlightenment under J.Z. Knight. And then he left and he said, oh, I think it's a cult. And he left. And then he was in NXIVM. And he called me on the phone after leaving NXIVM because he found out about the women being mistreated and so forth, and he left. And Mark called me and he said, Rick, you were like Satan in our group. I mean, we were told, this guy is like Satan, he's evil, he's a suppressive person, don't ever look at anything on culteducation.com, it's evil, it's evil. He said, so when I realized that Keith was bad, I thought maybe conversely you might be good. Aww. So he called me up and he said, I'm beginning to think I'm a cult hopper. And I've heard this same narrative over and over of people who go from cult to cult to cult. And we've called it cult hopping, you know, a cult hopper. Yeah. And so Mark said to me, Rick, I don't want to be a cult hopper. I want this to be over. I'm middle-aged. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And so I said, well, Mark, you need to unpack everything. You need to read the literature on thought reform, on coercive persuasion, on cults, and you will understand what happened to you. And you can validate a lot of the feelings that you've had intuitively about how you were being manipulated. And then when somebody approaches you in the future and they're beginning to exhibit those type of behaviors, you can say, hey, I've done this. I got the mug, I got the t-shirt, you know, I don't want to do it again. Okay, get away from me, get away from me. And that's exactly what Mark did. And now he's helped a lot of people, again, using social media in a positive way to share his experience with others. And I think that is the way to inoculate yourself from being involved in a cult, is understanding how cults really work. Read the stories, the narratives of how they got out, how they got in. Read the research that is available on the techniques used by these groups so that you really get it. And then if somebody approaches you, you are forewarned and armed and ready to deal with it. And the people that are targeted are often very bright, very with it people, because those are the type of people that are useful in a cult. Tom Cruise has often been called basically the poster boy for Scientology. And many people look at him and say, well, if a guy that smart and successful can be in Scientology, maybe it's good. I'm going to go and do some of their coursework. I'm going to read their literature. I'm going to find out about it. So very smart with it people do get recruited. And I think it's because they were not properly informed beforehand and they weren't properly aware of what might happen. And if we create that awareness and people are aware, then they can be protected.
Coming up.
There's a line that you can cross when you are under the influence of a cult leader that has consequences you can never escape.
We'll be right back with some more fire tactics from Rick Alan Ross. But right now, guys, I want to talk about something that's weighing on me and so many other women. It can be freaking hard to get a good night's sleep, especially when you're getting hot flashes that just keep you awake, or your partner's just snoring loudly in your ear, or you just can't find a comfortable sleeping position. Getting enough sleep is so damn important for our brains, our body, our confidence, and everything else in between. But when you have the right mattress like Helix, you will sleep better and your partner will too. I absolutely love how Helix has a cooling technology in their mattress so that if someone like me overheats as my hormones are changing, I can actually still get a great night's sleep and not worry about those hot flashes. So you've got to go and check out Helix. And right now, every everything is 25% off, and you get 2 free dream pillows with any core mattress purchase. Or if you buy a luxe or elite mattress, you'll get a free bedding bundle, which actually includes 2 dream pillows, a sheet set, and a mattress protector. And yes, that's actually on top of the 25% off, guys. Just go to helixsleep.com/WOI. That's helixsleep.com/WOI. Now, back to the episode. Helping me process and understand then what is happening between the difference between these cults that we've been talking about where you get branded, obviously horrendous. But then there's the next extreme that is Charles Manson, whereas you go and kill people brutally, pregnant woman, for the sake of the cult. That feels like a whole different category of cult where you're not only being manipulated and broken down, but you are being completely reformed to be a murderer. What is happening in that psychology where it can get that extreme?
Well, the Manson group was a very tightly wound group. This was maybe a couple dozen people who followed Charlie Manson. And he isolated them on a ranch. He gave them hallucinogenic drugs. He claimed that he was also tripping with them when he wasn't, and he was manipulating them.
He was like posing as Jesus when they were tripping, right? To kind of reinforce that idea.
And also he sexually exploited them. He was just a master manipulator. And he was an ex-con. He had been in prison. And he learned to run little con games and play out games on his fellow prisoners. And when he came out of prison, it was kind of the psychedelic 60s, and there was this counterculture movement. And this is what cult leaders do all the time. They try to hook into popular culture with that theme in order to pull people in and say, like, yeah, if you're into that, you should be into me. And so Charlie Manson portrayed himself as kind of a hippie when he wasn't, and being kind of counterculture when he wasn't. And he really brutally controlled people. And what he told them was that the end of the world was coming, in a sense, that there would be this period of upheaval that he called helter-skelter, and that it was coming, and that the way that this would begin would be if they killed people that were white, that were wealthy people in very affluent neighborhoods in Los Angeles, and made it appear that it was black people that were doing these murders, and that they were racially motivated. And this would be the spark that would begin this race war in the United States. But in reality, Manson, like so many cult leaders, he had his own baggage, and he had hung out with very prominent people in the music industry, a member of the Beach Boys, and he thought that he could be a rock star. He could be a successful musician. And when he learned that they were just blowing him off and that he wasn't going to make it and be a star like he thought, he was very angry. And I would say that it was really almost a narcissistic rage that animated the end of the Manson family, as it was called, because Charlie Manson was mad, he was angry, he wanted to get even, and he used his people to do it. And I write about this in my book, and I write about Leslie Van Houten, who was a cheerleader, who was a middle-class girl living in Los Angeles, a very typical, not radical, not extreme. And she became involved with Charlie Manson. She became enthralled with him. She was under his thumb, and she killed for him. And she spent most of her life in prison until she was recently released, which, quite frankly, I was opposed to, because I received a call from a member of the LaBianca family.
That's someone, in case people don't know, that's who was killed.
The murders were called the Tate-LaBianca murders. Sharon Tate was a famous actress who was married to the movie director Roman Polanski. She was murdered by Manson's followers. And also a very prominent family, the LaBiancas. Their home was invaded. They were horribly murdered. Leslie Van Houten was the person who killed Mrs. LaBianca, and she stabbed her brutally multiple times. And I had commented about Charlie Manson and his followers and how they had been manipulated and weaponized. And a member of the LaBianca family called me and they said, "You have no idea the pain that that murder caused our family, what we went through, how it affected all of the family. They were like so important to our family." And that woman, I don't think she should be executed, but I was told by this member of the LaBianca family she should be in prison for the rest of her life, and thankful that she is not dead like my family members. And so I realized that, you know, there's a line that you can cross when you are under the influence of a cult leader that has consequences that you can never escape. And in that sense, I never supported the release of Leslie Van Houten, though other people did. I sympathize with what happened to her and how Charlie Manson made her do it, and that she otherwise would never have killed anyone. But at the same time, when there's that kind of human carnage and that kind of loss, I had more sympathy for the LaBianca family.
Do you think that there's any slight difference, though, in the manipulation of a cult leader versus someone that gets you to kill?
Well, Manson, very much like Shoko Asahara, like Paul McKenzie in Kenya, like David Koresh, convinced people that they were part of a much larger situation, a much larger historical kind of narrative. So for example, Shoko Asahara also said, this release of sarin gas in the Tokyo subway system will precipitate the end of the world. Paul McKenzie told his people, fast and pray because doomsday is approaching and you must reconcile. So the people began to see themselves and the Manson family members as part of a much larger story, and that they were powerless in a sense not to play out their role in it, and that they were made to feel that this is bigger than you, and who are you to say no? You must agree because our ultimate end is the purification of the world and the judgment of the world. And this is the end of the world. And your role in it must be played out. So people felt that if I say no, I am stopping the purification of the world. I am stopping God's final judgment. I am stopping the end result of this race war, which will be a better world. I mean, that's what they were told. And so I think in that sense, they felt a sense of powerlessness, as the pawn feels, that they could not resist this narrative, that it was what they were part of and that they must acquiesce to it, they must consent to it, they must go along with it. And at every step of the way, there were other people around them that were saying, of course, absolutely, this is the truth. And it was being reinforced day after day, hour after hour. And they were cut off from their family, from their friends, and anyone that would offer them an alternative explanation. So when you read about Leslie Van Houten, here was a woman who stabbed Mrs. LaBianca, I think, 20 times, or how many times she stabbed her, many times. It was a brutal murder, very, very gory, very horrible. And you think, what kind of a person could do that? Well, Leslie Van Houten would go into prison, and she would be there for decades, never a problem, no violence. She would get a college degree, a postgraduate degree. She would be lauded for counseling other women, helping other prisoners. And eventually she would be released because people felt that she had been fully rehabilitated. But when she talks about it, and she talks about initially being in prison, and then that her father came to visit her, and finally she had that reinforcement of who she once was from her family, and she was cut off from Charlie Manson and the other members. She could not communicate with them. So Manson and his other followers could not reinforce the mindset that he had created. But her family and the people that were now permeating that bubble that once existed could come and sit with Leslie Van Houten and say, but we love you, and this isn't who you are, and don't you remember this from your childhood, and this from your days in high school, and don't you remember our family and all the friends you had? And it broke down the mindset that Charlie Manson had created. And I think the evidence is that Leslie Van Houten did not go the way of violence ever again, that she was a model prisoner. So I think that the story of Leslie Van Houten is a narrative of showing someone before, during, and after a cult, and how the cult affected her life, her way of looking at the world, and how breaking that tie with the group allowed her to revert to how she had been before and to move on with her life.
So what's the difference then, if you can help me think through this, the difference between them feeling powerless and doing something like going out and killing somebody for the greater good? I can feel like that's a progressive towards. But then you have someone that's slightly different, but I'd love to talk about Elizabeth Smart, who was just stripped down, powerless, and yet still couldn't leave. So in case people don't know who Elizabeth Smart is, if you don't mind filling it in, and then explain to me, why didn't she just walk away?
Well, first of all, the story of Elizabeth Smart. She lived in a very tight-knit family in Salt Lake City. Her father was very successful. He was building a new home, and he employed what he thought were homeless people that were disadvantaged to help at the construction site. And one of those people was a man named Brian Mitchell, who considered himself to be a prophet, a revelator with God's word, and he had only one follower, a woman that he completely subjugated by the name of Wanda Barzee. So he became a helper at the work site. He saw Elizabeth Smart, who was then 14 years old. He went in the middle of the night, broke into the Smart home, got into her bedroom, put a knife to her throat, took her out while her sister watched, and told her sister, "I'll kill you and your family if you even raise your voice." So he then took her away, kidnapped her. He put her in a pit and tied her up, abused her horribly, and told her repeatedly, "I will murder your family if you resist. I will murder your family if you cry out." And gradually, through the influence of Wanda Barzee, who was reinforcing whatever he said at that time, and his constant domination over this 14-year-old child, he was able to break her down, change her perception of the world, and then lock it in, refreeze it through a process of coercive persuasion. And she was kidnapped with him for quite a few months. And then people would see her, and she would at times be in a position where she could run and scream and say, "I'm Elizabeth Smart, help me." And of course, the news media was putting her photograph out there. Everyone was looking for her.
Missing posters everywhere.
Everywhere. And finally, she was with Mitchell and Barzee on a road outside of Salt Lake City, and the police thought they looked kind of strange, stopped them, and they looked at her and said, "Are you Elizabeth Smart?" And she said something like, "Thou dost say I am," in this kind of stilted language that she learned from Mitchell. And she wouldn't admit who she was. Then she was taken away from Mitchell and Barzee, brought to a place where her father came, and then she finally broke down and started crying and was happy to be reunited with her father, but she had to unplug. And this is another thing to understand. If you are in a destructive authoritarian group or an abusive controlling relationship, take a break. If you have second thoughts, if you have doubts, if you feel like maybe something is wrong, unplug, take a break, reflect, get out of the bubble, and contemplate and talk to other people and think things through. Because the key to breaking cult control is to be away from the group where the group cannot reinforce you. So that's what happened to Elizabeth Smart. And probably another case that really must be mentioned is Patricia Hearst. Patty Hearst was an heiress to the Hearst fortune. The man, William Randolph Hearst, who built Hearst Castle in San Simeon, very wealthy family. She was also abducted at knife point from a college campus when she was like 17, 18 years old. She was held, she was beaten, she was abused, and she literally succumbed. She fell apart, and they then told her what to believe, what to think. And she even was given a new name, Tanya, and she became part of this political group that was called the Symbionese Liberation Army. And she was part of a bank robbery where she held a machine gun, which she later said was not loaded. And she was eventually freed from the group, but arrested and went to prison for bank robbery. And then her sentence was commuted by Jimmy Carter, who was then president, which I met Patty Hearst once, and it was during the Elizabeth Smart, after Elizabeth Smart was rescued, and Patty Hearst and I both were on the Today Show. And I bumped into her in the green room, and it was amazing, and we talked for a while, and she said to me, you know, it was such a relief to surrender to them when I was under so much stress. You have no idea how much stress I was under resisting what they wanted me to accept and believe. And so inside I felt, but if I just surrender, then the pain will stop. And so I did. And then that was reinforced. And then she told me a funny story. She said she was on a prison yard with another revolutionary, and they were comparing notes. And Patty Hearst said to her, "Don't you ever have doubts?" And the woman looked at her and said, "You are counter-revolutionary.
Oh, God.
You are a traitor. You're bad." And she left Patty Hearst, and Patty Hearst thought to herself, well, maybe you need to believe that because you have a life sentence. You killed someone, but I was just an accessory to a bank robbery, and I'm going to get out, and I need to think things through. And she went on, left prison, never again was involved with any group like the SLA, and raised her family, happily married, raised kids. And so the idea that someone can be changed through an involvement with a very controlling group in a coercive persuasion process is borne out by the story of Patty Hearst, by the story of Elizabeth Smart, who has really become a voice for victims' rights and has talked about overcoming the pain and the suffering.
So you're a cult deprogrammer, parents may come to you, they say, hey, my kid is maybe in a cult, which by the way is something that has stuck with me, that it always seems to be younger people. Like, I know that the brain, oh no, please tell me, really?
I would say the largest single target group is 18 to 26.
Oh, yeah.
But with people recruiting online, I have worked with people as young as 10 or 11 years old through the court system and through parents that children were involved in a destructive cult, and people as old as 80 that were caught up in a group whose adult children hired me to help get their parents out.
Wow.
But I would say by and large, it's 18 to 26, because if you're a cult leader, you want them healthy, physically able to work hard, to work long hours to help you. But maybe if they're older and they have assets that you can get your hands on, you also might be interested in that as well. So I would say the cult phenomenon, it could affect anyone in any age group. Now, when I sit down with someone, and this will go on for 3 or 4 days, 8 hours a day.
It's like an intervention that you do.
Yeah, it's an intervention, much like a drug or alcohol intervention. The person is surprised initially. They are not told, oh, we're going to do an intervention. Don't forget to be here at 9 for the intervention. No, it is a surprise, and you sit down and the family is there. Whoever has retained me is there. And they are saying, look, we're very concerned about your involvement recently in this group or with this person. And we'd like to talk about it, okay? And we asked this person to sit in as an expert to help us. And we will talk about 4 basic blocks or categories of things. Number 1, defining a destructive cult. How do you define it? What are the attributes? Are there any parallels with the group that you're involved in? Or what is an abusive controlling relationship like? What is the profile of an abuser like? Is the person you're involved with anything like that through their behavior, what they've done? Number 2, what is coercive persuasion? How does it work? What are the warning signs? What are the dynamics of it? Let's look at case studies. Let's look at research. Does any of this resonate with you about what you've been experiencing lately? Number 3, what research or documentation is available about the group that you're involved with or the person that you're involved with that you don't know that you should know to make a more informed decision about your future involvement? And then finally, the 4th block, why did your family do this? Why am I here? What did they see that caused them so much concern that they brought me in and felt this needed to happen? And the family is offering their views ongoing regarding the other 3 blocks of discussion because they're eyewitnesses. So they're going to say, yeah, well, we saw this and we experienced that. And then you stopped talking to us, or you cut off your friends, or you gave so much money and you charged your credit cards to the max, giving money to the group, or you dropped out of school because they told you school was meaningless, or you quit your job because they told you your job would get you nowhere. And you did these things and they were a radical departure from your normal behavior, and it caused us concern. And so the family becomes eyewitnesses to what has happened. And at the end of that 3 or 4 days, that person will decide to take a break, to continue with the group or the partner, or to leave entirely. It's up to them. Typically, about 7 out of 10 people that I work with will unplug at the end of the intervention. About 3 out of 10 will probably leave in the first day or 2 and not come back and continue.
Oh, so continue with the cult?
Yes.
Ah.
They will say, look, I'm done. I know you wanted me to stay for like 3 days of discussion. I'm not doing it. I'm leaving on day 1, goodbye. Or they may even, some people leave in the first hour and say, I don't want to talk about any of this. But most people, 7 out of 10, will say, look, I know you love me, to the people that are there, and I know you care about me, And you wouldn't have done this if you didn't have legitimate concerns. And I'm going to sit and talk this out with you until you're okay, because I love you. And so that's really another truth about the whole thing. If you're in a relationship and it really is based on love and not abuse, that will come out in the wash in your discussion. If you're in a group and the group is based on facts, is based on some higher truth that is not destructive to you or your life, and that they're not hurting you, and that they're not a bad group, they're a good group. Maybe your parents got it wrong, maybe your family got it wrong. This is your chance to explain it and unpack it in a way that your family will say, well, I'm sorry, we're wrong. And there have been interventions where I've been brought in, and that happens. And the family ends up saying, well, I guess we were wrong.
Wow.
And this really isn't a cult. And they will talk to me, the person. I can remember one woman saying to me, I'm not in a cult. I know I'm not in a cult. And she started crying. And she said, but I will stay here as long as it takes so that my family knows that I'm not in a cult. And not only that, she took me to the church that the family said was a cult. And the minister of the church said, we're not a cult. But I'll tell you what, we will sit here with you and the family and we'll talk it out as long as you want. And we have nothing to hide. And it turned out that the family thought, or they said, that this was part of the International Church of Christ led by Kip McKean, when in fact it was an independent Church of Christ not affiliated with Kip McKean. And then what came out was that this woman, a white woman, was involved romantically with a member of the church who was black. And the family was very angry about that. They did not want their daughter marrying someone not of her race. And so they said, oh, it's a cult. It's the International Church of Christ. And what I said to them eventually is, no, it is not part of the International Church of Christ. You are mistaken. The minister was very clear. We looked at all of the records and everything. This is not a part of the ICC. And you need to accept the fact that your daughter is going to date who she wants to date and marry who she wants to marry. And the husband came up to me afterwards and said, thanks, we needed to get that out. And I think this was a necessary step so that my wife will stop yelling about cults and start dealing with her real issue, which is that our daughter wants to marry this man who happens to be black. You know, but most of the time, and when I say most, we're exceeding 90%, it is some type of cult, or it is an abusive, controlling relationship. They have legitimate concerns, and you just, all you're really asking for that person to do in the intervention is give their family the time. Because the family is not saying you can't be in the group. They acknowledge that you can. It's your choice. But they want enough time to express their feelings, their concerns. And at the end of that time, you're going to do, or they accept the fact that their child or their family member is going to do what they feel they want to do.
Oh, Rick, Alan, Ross, you have blown my mind today. Where can people find you, follow you, and support you?
Well, Lisa, they can find me on Twitter, now X, at Rick Alan Ross. That is my Twitter handle. They can also find the Cult Education Institute Facebook page, or they can go to culteducation.com, which is a huge archive of information that was initially begun in 1996 and continues to expand every day with new documents, court documents, reports about controversial groups and movements, some that have been called cults. There's also a message board attached to that website at culteducation.com that has been up for 20 years that has the statements, the reflections of former cult members and affected families. So it's a huge resource available to people online. And at Amazon.com is my book, Cults Inside Out, which I think is a good book because it's a compendium of not only historical information about cults, beginning more or less with Charlie Manson and all the way forward to almost today, but it also has a chapter on cult brainwashing, a chapter on defining a destructive cult, chapters on intervention, case examples, so that it really helps people to understand how individuals are tricked and trapped, but also how they get out. And there's a chapter on recovery.
If you want to learn the signs that he's a psychopath, a sociopath, or a serial killer, then click here right now.
Many of them are less smooth than Bundy, but they all have a way, and they all have a place where they lure victims in.